Are you finding that your home feels more cluttered as you get older? What if I told you that certain items in your home are secretly making things worse without you realizing it? Let's dive in and uncover the 9 things you need to rethink for a cleaner, more organized space. As we age, it's easy to accumulate more stuff, whether it's sentimental keepsakes, old gadgets, or things we just don't need anymore. In this video, not only will I be sharing practical tips on how to declutter your home, but I'll also be telling you the stories of elderly people who've learned the hard way how clutter sneaks up on us. From an 80-year-old woman rediscovering her living room to a man in his 70s realizing he doesn't need 10 duplicate tools, these real-life examples will help you see how simple changes can make a big difference. So, stick around to find out how to reclaim your space and enjoy a tidier home. Section 1. Excessive furniture meat. Dorothy, a 75-year-old woman with a heart of gold. She loves hosting her family and friends for gatherings, and over the years she's filled her home with an abundance of furniture to make everyone feel comfortable. But as time passed, Dorothy started noticing that her living room felt more like a maze than a cozy gathering space. There were so many chairs, tables, and knickknacks crowding the space that it became difficult to move around, and visitors would often bump into one another. Despite her best intentions, the cluttered furniture made her home feel cramped rather than welcoming. It wasn't until one afternoon when Dorothy was planning a family dinner that she realized how much of the furniture she had accumulated over the years was no longer necessary. She had so many chairs that only a few were ever used at a time, and the large wooden coffee table in the middle of the room made it impossible to navigate the space. Her daughter came over and gently pointed out that by letting go of some of the excess furniture, Dorothy could make the space feel more open, airy, and inviting. It was a hard pill to swallow for someone who loved the idea of a well-furnished home, but Dorothy agreed it was time to simplify. With her daughter's help, Dorothy began sorting through the furniture. They first started with the extra chairs. She realized that many of them were rarely used. Some were even more for decoration than function. After parting with a few of them, the room immediately started to feel more spacious. Dorothy was amazed by how much of a difference just removing a few chairs made. It was as if the entire room had breathed a sigh of relief. The extra tables were next, and Dorothy came to the realization that one well-placed table was enough for her needs, leaving more open space for her family to gather around comfortably. As she downsized her furniture, Dorothy noticed something else. She could now move around her home more easily. The cluttered corners that were once filled with unnecessary pieces now felt open and free. Her guests, too, began commenting on how much more comfortable the space felt, and her home's welcoming atmosphere was restored. Dorothy no longer had to worry about the maze-like feel of her living room. Instead, she could enjoy the company of her loved ones without feeling cramped or overwhelmed. So, if you're finding your home feels a bit more cluttered than you'd like, take a tip from Dorothy. Consider downsizing your furniture to create a more open, breathable space. Whether it's removing extra chairs, tables, or even rethinking the layout of your rooms, sometimes less is more. By keeping only the pieces that are essential or truly add to your space's function and comfort, you'll create a more inviting environment and enjoy a newfound sense of freedom in your own home. Section 2. Overstuffed bookshelves. John, a 78-year-old retired librarian, has always had a deep love for books. His home was filled with shelves upon shelves of novels, biographies, and countless volumes of all genres. Over the years, as his collection grew, his bookshelves began to overflow. What started as a cozy, book-lined room slowly transformed into a cluttered space, making it harder to move around. John, who once prided himself on his extensive library, realized that many of these books hadn't been touched in years. They were gathering dust, crammed into every available shelf and corner, and the space that used to feel inviting now felt cramped and chaotic. It wasn't until his daughter visited one weekend and gently pointed out how overwhelming his bookshelves had become that John began to consider the situation. "You know, Dad, you can still keep the books you love, but maybe it's time to part with some of the ones you no longer read," she suggested. John, initially resistant to the idea of letting go of any book, was surprised by how freeing the thought of decluttering was. The idea that not every book had to remain in his home was foreign, but with his daughter's encouragement, he decided to give it a try. Together, they began the process of sorting through John's collection. The first step was simple. They started by taking out books that John hadn't read in decades or that he didn't feel a strong connection to anymore. He was surprised at how many he was willing to let go of. Some were outdated, while others were duplicates or books he had once read, but no longer had any interest in revisiting. As they worked through the piles, John began to rediscover books he hadn't thought about in years, the ones he truly cherished and still wanted to keep. The act of rediscovering those books brought back fond memories and reignited his love for reading in a new way. Once they had donated several boxes of books, the change in John's home was immediate. The bookshelves, once overcrowded, now had ample space. John noticed that the room felt bigger and lighter, and it was easier to find the books he wanted to read. More importantly, his collection now only included the books that mattered most to him, those he truly loved or knew he would read again. The process of simplifying his bookshelves not only made his space more organized, but also brought a sense of clarity and calm. So, if you're a book lover like John, take a tip from him and start reevaluating your bookshelf. Ask yourself, are there books on your shelves that you haven't touched in years? Are there any duplicates or books that no longer spark joy or interest? Consider donating or selling the ones you don't need anymore and keep only those that you truly cherish or regularly read. By curating your collection, you'll not only free up space, but also rediscover the joy of simplicity in your home. It's the perfect way to create a peaceful, clutter-free space without losing the books you hold dear. Section 3. Keepsakes and Memorabilia. Grace, now in her 80s, had always cherished the memories of her family. Over the years, she had accumulated a mountain of keepsakes, birthday cards, photos, trinkets, and little mementos that her children and grandchildren had given her. These items filled every nook and cranny of her home, from the top of her shelves to the drawers under her bed. For Grace, each item held sentimental value, and it was hard to part with any of them. They represented the love and thoughtfulness of her family, and letting go of even one felt impossible. But as time went on, Grace's home started feeling more like a storage space for memories rather than a place to live. One afternoon, Grace's granddaughter Emily came to visit and noticed how crowded the house had become with all of Grace's keepsakes. "Grandma, I know you love all these things, but wouldn't it feel nice to have some extra space to enjoy the new memories we're making together?" Emily gently suggested. Grace hadn't thought about it that way before, but the idea of making space for new memories while honoring the old ones seemed worth considering. After some discussion, Grace agreed to let Emily help her go through the collection. Together, they started sorting through the various cards, photographs, and trinkets. Grace was initially hesitant to part with anything, but Emily helped her focus on the pieces that held the most emotional value. They began with the cards, those sweet birthday greetings from her children and thoughtful notes from her grandchildren. Grace realized that while many of the cards were beautiful, they didn't all hold the same emotional significance. As she read through them, she carefully selected the ones that brought back the strongest memories, the ones that made her heart smile. The rest, though still meaningful, were ready to be passed on or recycled. Next, they tackled the trinkets. Grace had a collection of little figurines from her travels, but over time, many of them had lost their meaning. Emily helped her reflect on which items truly reminded her of special moments, those that had stories attached, like the small locket from her wedding day or the antique teacup passed down from her mother. Grace was amazed by how much more she appreciated those truly special items once she cleared away the excess. By donating or discarding the items she no longer felt a strong connection to, Grace made room for the pieces that really told her story. The process of decluttering Grace's keepsakes was more emotional than she had expected, but it also brought a sense of peace. As she rediscovered her favorite memories, she found that she could cherish the past without being overwhelmed by it. Grace now had a more organized and meaningful collection of keepsakes, items that continued to hold deep emotional value and served as constant reminders of the love she shared with her family. If you find yourself holding on to items just because they're sentimental, remember Grace's story. Take a moment to evaluate the keepsakes in your home and ask yourself, does this item truly hold a special memory for me, or am I keeping it out of habit? By keeping only the items with strong emotional value, you'll create a space that honors your memories while making room for new ones. Section 4. Outdated kitchen appliances. Tom, a 72-year-old retiree, had always enjoyed spending time in his kitchen, experimenting with new recipes and trying his hand at different cooking gadgets. Over the years, however, his love for kitchen appliances had led to an accumulation of outdated gadgets from the 80s. His kitchen was filled with bulky blenders, mixers, and coffee machines, many of which had been collecting dust for decades. One day, his daughter, Sarah, came over to visit and immediately noticed the kitchen's clutter. "Dad, do you really still use all of these things?" she asked, eyeing the dusty, forgotten gadgets. Tom, who had always had a hard time letting go of things, responded with a chuckle, "Well, I thought I might use them again one day." As Sarah started pulling items out of the kitchen drawers and cabinets, she was surprised at how many appliances Tom hadn't touched in years. The old blender, which had once made smoothies for Tom and his late wife, was now gathering dust at the back of a cupboard. The food processor that had been used to chop vegetables for Sunday dinners sat unused, taking up valuable counter space. Sarah gently pointed out that all these outdated appliances were not only taking up space, but also preventing Tom from enjoying a more organized, efficient kitchen. It was clear that some of these gadgets had outlived their usefulness, and it was time for a change. Together they began sorting through the kitchen gadgets, and Tom was shocked at how many things he had forgotten about. "I don't even remember the last time I used this blender," he admitted as he picked it up. Sarah suggested they donate some of the appliances to charity, and after some thought, Tom agreed. He kept only the essentials, the newer appliances that he actually used on a regular basis, like his coffee maker and the toaster oven. The old items, like the bulky food processor and the decade-old blender, were donated to a local charity. Section 4. Outdated kitchen appliances, where they could find new homes with people who would appreciate them. Once the outdated appliances were removed, Tom was amazed at how much more space he had in his kitchen. The countertops were cleared, and the drawers were now filled with only the appliances he truly used. Tom noticed that he could move around more easily, and his kitchen felt more efficient. The drawers and cabinets were organized, and he no longer had to struggle to find the things he actually needed. "It's like a brand new kitchen," Tom said, beaming with pride. He realized that by letting go of the outdated gadgets, he had created a space that made cooking easier and more enjoyable. So if your kitchen is overflowing with appliances that haven't seen the light of day in years, take a tip from Tom. Consider donating or replacing any outdated gadgets that you no longer use. By keeping only the appliances that truly serve a purpose in your kitchen, you'll create a more functional, organized space where cooking feels less like a chore and more like a pleasure. Plus, you'll make room for new gadgets that can actually improve your cooking experience. Section 5. Old clothing. Martha, at 79, had always taken great pride in her wardrobe. Over the years, she had accumulated a stunning collection of clothing, many of which held fond memories of her younger days. Her closet was filled with dresses from special occasions, outfits from her trips abroad, and the cherished pieces that once reflected her vibrant sense of style. However, as time passed, her once neatly organized closet became a cluttered mess. Martha realized that many of the clothes, while sentimental, no longer fit her or suited her lifestyle. Yet, it was difficult to part with them. "These dresses bring back so many memories," Martha would say, unwilling to let go of items that had once been so important to her. One afternoon, her daughter Emily visited and noticed how cramped Martha's closet had become. "Mom, I think it's time we go through your clothes and see what you really wear now," Emily suggested gently. Martha was initially hesitant, not wanting to lose the sentimental value attached to her clothes. "But these dresses, they remind me of all those wonderful times," she explained. Emily understood, but she also pointed out that the closet was now so packed that it was hard to even find the clothes Martha actually wore on a regular basis. It became clear that the clutter had stopped Martha from enjoying the wardrobe she still loved. Together, they began the task of sorting through the many pieces Martha had accumulated over the years. Emily encouraged her mom to focus on what she truly needed, asking, "Which of these clothes do you wear most often? Which ones still make you feel good?" Martha started to pull out pieces she hadn't worn in years: the dress from a wedding she had attended decades ago, the stylish suit she wore to her retirement party, and the jacket that no longer fit. It was a slow process, but Martha began to realize that some of the clothes were simply taking up space. The sentimental value was still there, but it wasn't worth keeping items that no longer served her. As they went through the closet, Emily helped Martha make decisions about what to keep. They set aside the clothes that Martha still loved and wore, and donated the ones that no longer fit or were no longer practical for her current lifestyle. Martha was surprised by how much space she had gained in her closet, and for the first time in years, she could actually see and enjoy the clothes that still brought her joy. "I never realized how much clutter was holding me back," Martha remarked as she looked at the newly organized space. It felt like a weight had been lifted, and the closet was no longer a source of stress. Martha's experience offers a valuable lesson to anyone who may be holding on to old clothing just because of sentimental attachments. If your closet is overflowing with clothes you no longer wear or that no longer fit, it's time to evaluate what truly belongs in your wardrobe. Keep only the essentials, those pieces that are comfortable, that you wear often, or that hold deep personal significance. By letting go of the excess, you'll create a closet that reflects your current style and needs while making room for new items that can help you feel your best. Plus, you'll be able to donate the clothes that no longer serve you to others who can make use of them, creating a win-win situation. Section 6. Duplicate items. George, an 80-year-old retiree, was always proud of his well-stocked garage. Over the years, he had collected an impressive array of tools: hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, and saws, each one carefully selected for a specific task. However, George had a habit of buying new tools whenever he saw a deal, even though his old ones still worked perfectly. "You never know when you'll need an extra one," he would tell his son Rob when questioned about the growing pile of tools. Little by little, his garage filled up with duplicate items, and what once was an organized space turned into a cluttered mess. It wasn't until Rob came over one weekend that he truly realized the scale of the problem. "Hey, Dad, do you really need 3 hammers, 6 screwdrivers, and 2 of every power tool?" Rob asked with a raised eyebrow. George chuckled and shrugged. "Well, I just thought it wouldn't hurt to have a spare." But as Rob began to point out the sheer number of duplicates, George had to admit that he was no longer using half of the tools he had accumulated. The garage, once his pride and joy, had become so overcrowded with redundant items that it was hard to find the tools he actually used regularly. Rob suggested they go through everything and see what could be donated or sold. You only need one of each tool you use most, not 10, he advised. Together they spent the afternoon sorting through the clutter. They started with the tools George used frequently. They set aside the hammer and screwdriver sets he always reached for, the ones he trusted and knew were in good condition. The rest, the extra wrenches, duplicate drills, and a few other tools that had been replaced over time, were set to be donated. George was initially reluctant, but Rob gently reminded him that the extra tools weren't serving any purpose. "You've got a lot of stuff here, Dad, but it's just taking up space now," Rob explained. "You'll feel better with a more organized garage, and you won't have to wade through all this extra stuff to find what you really need." As they cleared out the duplicates, George was amazed at how much more space he had in his garage. The shelves, which had been stacked to the brim, were now organized and easily accessible. "It's amazing how much room we freed up," George remarked, looking around at the now neat and orderly space. The tools that remained were the ones George actually used, and everything had its proper place. He realized that by eliminating duplicates, his garage had become a more functional and efficient space, making it easier to enjoy his favorite hobby, working on projects around the house. George's story is a reminder for anyone, especially those who have accumulated items over many years, to take a look at what's truly necessary. If you find that you have multiple items of the same kind, whether tools, kitchen gadgets, or other household goods, it's time to review what you actually use on a regular basis. By eliminating duplicates, you can make your home feel more spacious, organized, and functional. Keeping only the items that you truly need will give you more space for the things that matter most, while making your life simpler and more enjoyable. Section 7. Unused electronics. Sophie, a 76-year-old woman, had always been a bit of a technology enthusiast. Over the years, she had collected a variety of electronics, from vintage radios to old televisions, and even phones from decades ago. She would often smile fondly at these items, remembering when they were the cutting-edge technology of their time. "This radio, I used to love it," Sophie would say, running her fingers over its worn knobs. "And this TV, it was the first color one I ever had." But as time passed, Sophie's collection of electronics grew larger and larger. Many of these items had long since stopped working or were outdated. They simply sat in her living room, gathering dust and taking up valuable space. One day, Sophie's children came over to visit, and as soon as they stepped into the living room, they noticed the growing pile of electronics. "Mom, do you really use all these things?" her daughter Anna asked gently. Sophie looked around and realized that, aside from the newer television she still used, most of the electronics hadn't been touched in years. The radios were broken, the phones were old models with no service, and the TVs were relics of an era long gone. "Well, I guess I haven't used them in ages," Sophie admitted, "but I just can't bring myself to get rid of them. They hold so many memories." Sophie was reluctant to let go of the technology that had once been an important part of her life, but her children knew it was time for a change. After a brief conversation, Sophie agreed to let her children help her sort through the pile of unused electronics. Together, they carefully examined each item. They checked the old radios and TVs, confirming that they no longer worked or served any real purpose. Sophie had held on to these items for sentimental reasons, but as her children pointed out, they were no longer useful and were taking up valuable space. "Mom, these things don't work anymore, and you don't really need them. It's okay to let go," her son Peter said reassuringly. Sophie was hesitant at first, but as they packed up the broken items, she began to feel a sense of relief. It was then that Sophie realized how much space she had been giving up to these outdated electronics. The living room, once crowded with bulky old items, now felt open and airy. Sophie's children took the items to be recycled, and Sophie felt a sense of freedom. I didn't realize how much these old things were holding me back, Sophie remarked as she looked around at her newly decluttered living room. With the space cleared, Sophie was able to focus on enjoying her newer technology, like the television she still loved, without the distraction of old gadgets that no longer served her. Sophie's story is a helpful reminder for anyone with outdated or unused electronics cluttering up their home. Take the time to go through your collection of old phones, radios, TVs, and other gadgets and assess whether they still serve a purpose. If they don't, it's time to let go. Recycling or donating electronics can help free up valuable space in your home and make room for the things you actually use. By doing so, you'll not only declutter your living space, but also give yourself the opportunity to enjoy the technology that truly adds value to your life. Section 8. Seasonal Decorations. Margaret, an 80-year-old woman, had always been passionate about decorating her home for every season and holiday. From Christmas to Easter, Halloween to Thanksgiving, Margaret's house was a sight to behold. She took great pride in setting up intricate displays of seasonal decorations, filling every nook and cranny with holiday cheer. "It's a tradition," Margaret would say with a smile. "I've been decorating like this for years, and it just wouldn't feel like the season without it." However, over the years, Margaret's collection of decorations had grown exponentially. What started as a few boxes of ornaments and holiday knickknacks had turned into multiple overflowing bins scattered throughout her attic and closets. One day, her son David came over to help her organize her home. As they were going through the attic, they found an entire corner filled with boxes of decorations for each holiday. "Mom, how many holiday decorations do you need? You've got things from every single season packed away here," David said, a little overwhelmed by the sheer volume of items. Margaret chuckled and explained, "I just can't part with them. They all remind me of special moments with family and friends." But as they started pulling out the various boxes, it became clear that many of the decorations had lost their charm or were no longer in good condition. The more they dug through the boxes, the more Margaret realized that some of the decorations were never displayed anymore and just took up space. With David's gentle encouragement, Margaret agreed to pare down her massive collection. Section 8. Seasonal Decorations. Together they laid out all the decorations from the various holidays and seasons. They carefully evaluated each item, considering how much joy it brought her. Some items, like the antique snow globe she received from her mother, were definitely staying. Others, like the plastic pumpkins from Halloween or the faded garlands from Christmas, no longer held the same sentimental value. "I think it's time to let go of some of these," Margaret said a little wistfully, but with a sense of relief. "I just don't need all of them anymore." After a few hours of sorting, Margaret and David managed to narrow down her collection to only the items that truly brought joy or had lasting memories attached. Instead of keeping everything, they made space for the pieces she loved most. David also helped her find storage solutions for the items that remained, neatly organizing them into clearly labeled bins so they could easily be accessed and stored between seasons. "Now I can enjoy decorating without feeling overwhelmed," Margaret said, as she admired the neatly organized boxes. "It feels good to have space again and only keep the things that really mean something to me." Margaret's experience is a great reminder that while seasonal decorations can bring a lot of joy, it's easy to accumulate too many over time. If your holiday decorations are taking up more space than they're worth, it may be time to evaluate which items you truly love and cherish. Keep only the decorations that bring you joy and hold special memories, and make sure they're stored in a way that keeps them accessible but out of the way. By doing so, you'll be able to enjoy decorating without the burden of excess, creating a home that feels fresh and organized year-round. Section 9. Paper piles and documents. Stanley, an 82-year-old man, had always been meticulous about keeping records. Over the years, his home had accumulated piles of papers, old tax documents, bills, receipts, and even junk mail. It wasn't uncommon to find stacks of paperwork on his kitchen table, piled high on the couch, and even in the corners of his bedroom. "I might need these someday," Stanley would say, explaining why he held on to everything, no matter how old or irrelevant it seemed. But as time went on, the piles only grew, making it harder to keep track of the important documents and creating a sense of constant overwhelm in his home. One afternoon, his daughter Emily came over for a visit and noticed the ever-growing mountain of paper scattered around. "Dad, this has gotten out of hand," Emily remarked as she picked up a stack of papers that hadn't been touched in years. Stanley sighed, admitting, "I've been meaning to sort through them, but it just seems like too much. What if I throw away something important?" Emily understood his concern but reassured him that with a little effort, they could go through everything and clear out the clutter. Together they sat down to begin the daunting task of sorting through the endless piles of documents. As they carefully went through the papers, Stanley was surprised by how many were no longer necessary. "These tax returns are from over 10 years ago," Emily pointed out. "You don't need to keep these anymore." Stanley hesitated at first, but Emily explained that many documents, like old utility bills and outdated tax returns, could be safely shredded. They worked together to create piles of papers to keep, shred, or recycle. It wasn't long before Stanley realized that most of the papers were simply taking up space without any real value. By the time they finished sorting, Stanley was amazed at how much space had been freed up. "I had no idea how much of this was just clutter," he said, feeling a sense of relief. With the paper piles reduced, Emily helped Stanley set up a system for staying organized going forward. They created a filing system for important documents, ensuring that Stanley could easily access what he truly needed. Emily also set up a shredder for Stanley, explaining that he could simply shred anything he no longer needed on a regular basis. "You don't have to keep every receipt or bill," Emily said. "Just keep the important ones and get rid of the rest." Stanley appreciated the clarity and felt empowered to stay on top of his paperwork moving forward. Stanley's story is a reminder that we all tend to accumulate paper over time, but it doesn't have to overwhelm us. For seniors, it's important to regularly go through old documents and shred anything that is no longer needed. By setting aside time to sort through papers, you can create a much more organized and spacious living environment. Don't be afraid to part with outdated bills, receipts, and old paperwork. Chances are you don't need them anymore, and clearing them out will give you the freedom to focus on what truly matters. Conclusion. And there you have it. 9 things that could be making your home feel cluttered as you get older. By taking a little time to go through your space, you can create a much more open, comfortable, and organized environment. Remember, it's about keeping what truly brings you joy and letting go of the things that no longer serve you. Thanks for watching, and if you found these tips helpful, don't forget to hit the like button. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment 9 if you're going to tackle some of these clutter hotspots, or 0 if you're already on top of it. Until next time, take care and keep your home feeling peaceful and fresh.